In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the rear wheel cylinder on this Honda Civic. This is what engages your brake shoes on a drum brake setup, pushes out on them, so it's located behind the rear drum. Let's get started. Use a 19mm socket to remove all 5 lug nuts and then remove the wheel. Now remove the brake drum. Sometimes it gets stuck on the hub, and if that's the case, tap it with a hammer till it breaks free, or if the shoes are holding it on, make sure the e-brake is not engaged. Otherwise, it should wiggle off fairly easily. I sprayed everything with some brake parts cleaner, not only so we can see what's going on better, but drum brakes are very dusty inside, and I wanted to get rid of all of that dust before I fling it up in the air while working. This is also a great time to inspect the brake shoes, and if your wheel cylinder was leaking, replace everything because there's brake fluid all over, most likely. In my case, they are dry. This is not leaking yet, but what I want to do is replace this without removing any of the shoes so that I can show you how to replace just the wheel cylinder if that's what you need. What I'm going to use is locking pliers or a C-clamp to hold these shoes spread apart so I can remove and reinstall the wheel cylinder as is without touching any of this hardware. I'm going to put a pair of locking pliers right here. Perfect, you don't need to pull that much. Pull that one. At this point, the wheel cylinder should not be touching the brake shoes anymore, so let's go on the back side and unbolt it. You're going to need a 10mm flare nut wrench to break this line free, and hopefully the fitting breaks free off of the line because sometimes they get stuck and then it wants to twist the line off. If that's the case, you'll need to break it free by working it back and forth, because if you twist it too many times with the line, it'll actually break the line. And there we go. That's letting go quite a bit. Now we will have brake fluid leaking, just so you know, so I have a collection bucket ready to catch that brake fluid. I'm just going to unthread this all of the way. Once you break it free enough, it's easier if you just use a regular open-ended wrench. All right, pull this line out. There are 2 10mm bolts up top that we have to remove to get the wheel cylinder off. These shouldn't be very tight. Once you break them free, they should come off fairly easily by hand. There's one. Oh, there we go. That's the second one. Leave it right there, squishing on the pistons. Fluid comes out the back, that's normal. And remove it from the backing plate. There it is. Quickly inspect this area and wipe it off to make sure that the wheel cylinder is making good contact with this backing plate. When you slide the new one in, make sure the bleeder screw is at the top, not upside down. Make sure that it lines up on the back side. And this bolt is easier to start on, so I'm going to start with this one. That way this holds it on while I start the other one. Okay, try to start the other one now. Once they're both started, you can snug them up. There's no way I can get a torque wrench in here to accurately torque them, so I'm just going to take my longer 10mm wrench, give them about 1/8 of a turn after they bottom out. They are small bolts. I don't want to break them, and I don't want to strip it out, but I do want to make sure it's tight. Since I'm here, I'm going to pop open the bleeder screw cap with an 8mm. I'm going to open the bleeder screw. What this does is, as I thread on the line, it fills up the wheel cylinder with fluid and starts up my gravity bleed. Okay, get that line seated and thread it in. Now with these brake fittings, if the line isn't perfectly parallel with the threads, this will not seat, it will not thread on. So just try to get it to line up before you start the best you can. There we go, got it started. If you just move it around while you thread it on and just visually try to make it parallel, it should hook on, and if it starts getting really tight but it's not bottomed out, it is most likely cross-threading, so back it off and try again. Otherwise, you're going to ruin the threads on it. That's bottomed out. I'll give it a little extra. That should be sealed up nice. While we wait for the bleed to happen, we can release our locking pliers with the brake shoes now. Make sure they seat back into the wheel cylinder. Make sure they're still seated all the way around. And now we'll just wait for gravity to pull fluid through the line, into the wheel cylinder, and out through the bleeder screw. This is called a gravity bleed. Once we're done with this, you can perform a manual brake bleed if you need to, which you will see at the end of the video how to do, but usually this does the trick. Looks like we already have a steady trickle of clean fluid coming through, so I know that fresh fluid from the master has made its way in. I'm going to close this off, snug it, and clean everything with brake parts cleaner to make sure there's no residual brake fluid left. Once you've done that, cap off the bleeder screw so that it doesn't get clogged up. Since we had the brake shoes exposed, it's a good idea to lubricate the pivot points, and especially since we use brake parts cleaner on them. Try not to touch the shoe material at all, but use some brake grease or high temperature rated silicone paste to lubricate here, up at the top, and down at the bottom. This will prevent the shoes from squeaking as you apply the brakes or the parking brake, and do the same to the other shoe. The surface of the hub should be wire brushed lightly just to get any debris or old grease or rust off, and then I will coat it with some fresh anti-seize in order to prevent rust and corrosion from building up in the future. A thin layer will do the trick here, because if you put too much, it'll fling onto the surface of the drum while you drive, and that would of course affect the braking because the shoes can't grip anymore. So once again, a very thin layer only to avoid corrosion on the hub. Reinstall the drum. There we go. Let's get the wheel back on. Reinstall all 5 lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 79 foot-pounds. Once again, 79 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Double check them. There you have it, job is done. To start the brake bleed, remove the master cylinder cap, which is located on the driver's side of your engine bay. Once you've removed the cap, if you read the text, it'll say at the top right here, .3 brake fluid. That's what this vehicle takes. So you want to make sure you have plenty on hand. And also, if it is dirty, definitely clean off the area around the cap and on the cap before you take this off. Mine was very clean, so I skipped that. There's also a little screen in here. We're gonna have to remove that as well in order to get the fluid out. I prefer to extract the old fluid before I start. So take this off and set it aside, and make sure you put it somewhere where brake fluid won't damage any surface. And at this point, you can use a fluid extractor pump. I'm using a vacuum pump. You can use a turkey baster if that's all you have, and just remove as much of the old fluid out of the reservoir as you can. Stick the hose in there, and I have this reservoir that the fluid will collect in as I pull a vacuum on it. All right, looks like I got it all out, or as much as I can. You will never get 100% of it out, but the more you do, the fresher the brake fluid will be as it goes through the lines. Now let's fill up the brake fluid reservoir with .3 brake fluid until it reaches the max line. The full line is this right here below the cap where it locks in. We're right about there, so I'm going to cap this off now. That way no debris or moisture gets in here. And now it's time to bleed the brakes. On this particular vehicle, the bleed sequence is to start at the front left caliper, that's the driver's side, bleed that, then move on to the right front, that's the passenger side front, then top off that master cylinder because it will be a little bit low after this, then move to the right rear, the passenger side rear that is, and then the last one will be the left rear and bleed that side, top off the master cylinder after that, and if the pedal does not feel firm or the way you expect it to, bleed again because there's likely more air in the system. But if it feels good, you're good to go. All right, so we're at the front driver's side caliper. I'm going to remove the bleeder screw boot or cover. And I have this collection receptacle with a hose on it that goes right on the bleeder screw that prevents a lot of spillage. And I'm going to have an assistant in the vehicle ready to pump up the brakes, create some pressure, and then they're going to hold pressure on that brake pedal while I open the bleeder screw to let the fluid out. Go ahead and pump. Okay, open this up. There's a new caliper, so a lot of air. Go ahead and pump again. Okay, pump again. All right, getting better. Go ahead and pump again. All right, go again. I still see a few air bubbles. You want to do this until you have no more air bubbles coming through this hose or out the bleeder screw. All right, that was nice and clean. Let's do it once again. Go ahead and pump. Another clean bleed. One last time just for safety. All right, perfect. You can let go of the brake pedal now. I had several clean bleeds in a row, no air bubbles, no aerated fluid or anything like that. So I'm going to remove my hose and wipe this off. If there was any spillage, go ahead and clean it up with brake parts cleaner. You want to make sure that no brake fluid stays on the caliper, not only so that it doesn't get messy, but also you don't want to confuse it for a potential leak. Cover this back up. Hopefully you still have the cover. This prevents it from getting clogged up. And now you would move to the right front. That's the passenger side front caliper, and do the same exact thing over there. Now that you've bled both front calipers, remove the cap and top off the master cylinder again to make sure it's full for the rear. You want this to stay full. If it pulls air in, you're gonna have to start all over. And if you have ABS, it'll get into the module, so you wanna make sure you avoid that. Cap this off so debris and moisture doesn't get in. Let's continue to the right rear. We're on the right rear wheel. This has drum brakes, so we have a wheel cylinder on the back here. If you have disc brakes and a caliper, it is still the same sequence, so still right rear after you do the front. Having said that, I'm gonna pop the bleeder screw cap off of the bleeder screw. This is an 8mm, by the way, no longer a 10 like in the front. I have my assistant in the vehicle pumping up the brake pedal. Go ahead. All right, they're holding pressure. I'm gonna put my hose on here, and with my 8mm wrench, I'm gonna crack this free. All right, pedal hit the floor, so I'm gonna close it up. Go ahead and pump again. Okay, pump again. I don't see air, but this fluid is extremely dirty, very dark in color, so I'm gonna keep going till I get some fresher fluid through. One last time, go again. That is much cleaner. You can let go of the brake pedal now. I'm going to remove my hose, the collection bucket, and I did spill some fluid here, so I'm going to wipe everything down with a rag and spray brake parts cleaner on this to clean everything off. Once you've done that, cap off the bleeder screw. And the last wheel is going to be the left rear. That's the driver's side rear wheel. Now after you're done bleeding the whole vehicle, remove the cap off the master cylinder and put more brake fluid in all the way up to the max line to make sure that's topped off. Put this cap back on. Make sure it's locked on tight. And at this point, if your pedal feels right, you're good to go. Bleed is done. The torque of the wheels is 79 foot-pounds, so make sure you torque all those to spec. If you are unhappy with how the brake pedal feels, repeat the same sequence until there is no air left in the system and the pedal feels nice and firm with the engine off. At that point, you would take it for a road test and confirm.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.